Welcome to the 2017 Pima County Street Count Working Together Counts volunteer training. Thank you so much for volunteering to help with this. Today's training will cover an introduction to the Tucson Pima collaboration to end homelessness and the goal of the street count, what to expect on the count day itself, the roles within teams, things to do with your survey, things to not do when you're surveying, and safety tips, the importance of confidentiality, the different survey tools, one's for individual, one for family, and one observation tool. And the goal of this year's street count is to count everyone who is experiencing homelessness in Tucson and Pima County. As you can see, Pima County is a rather large geographic area, and we'll be covering the majority of this in our count. The street count provides data that the community is used to determine the size and scope of homelessness at a local level. It helps us plan services and programs appropriately to address the local needs and measure progress in addressing homelessness. HUD uses this data to understand the extent and nature of homelessness throughout the country. It provides Congress with information on services provided and the gaps in services, and it helps them make funding decisions. So here's the plan for the day of the count. You'll survey all individuals experiencing homelessness. For people who decline the survey, you'll use an observation tool to record them. You'll proofread all documents for legibility and return all of your surveys to the team leaders, who will return the documents to headquarters by 11 a.m. There are 3 roles on most teams. There'll be a team leader, an assistant team leader, and then the interviewer. The team leader will serve as a liaison between headquarters and the team. They'll survey the area prior to the day of the count and connect with all team members. They're responsible for getting every team member to sign the confidentiality agreement and complete the volunteer training. The team leaders will manage the members of the team and the geographic area, be the point person for unclear terms and emergencies, and be responsible for picking up the gift cards distribution and returning all of the supplies to headquarters at the end of the day. Team leaders are also responsible for ensuring that all surveys are legible. Assistant team leaders are responsible for subgroups. They'll fill in where the team leader requests, ensure legibility, and ensure that family surveys are numbered and clipped together. Interviewers will complete surveys accurately with individuals, write legibly, ensure that family surveys are numbered and clipped together, and be positive representatives of the TPCH and Working Together Counts 2017 street count. It would also be a good idea to bring a clipboard so that you have something hard to write on. Here are some surveying do's. Introduce yourself and explain what you're doing. Follow the survey script on the top of each survey. Be sincere and thank people for their time, and remain calm to de-escalate any tense situations. Make sure that you remain aware of your surroundings and stay out of tight or enclosed spaces. Maintain appropriate distance from people as you're speaking with them. Protect people's privacy and make sure that you're not sharing information that you shouldn't. Honor requests of people to not participate or to skip questions. Provide people with a fast food gift card, cold kits, and resource information, as well as a drawstring bag. Approach if uncertain about homelessness, and dress appropriately. Layer comfortable shoes and not too many accessories. Make sure you carry an ID and a phone with you, but leave all your valuables behind. Check with your team leader and refer to contact numbers provided if you need any assistance. If you run into someone who is either a veteran, the following are some things to make certain you are not doing. Surveying outside your geographic area, duplicating surveys, or deviating from the survey at all. Please do not separate from your team, and do not touch people when waking them up or invade personal space. Make sure that you're not putting yourself or anyone else in danger. Please do not allow people to complete or fill out surveys themselves. Do not share any confidential information of participants. And please do not be judgmental or react to responses when asking questions on the survey. Do not mandate participation in the survey. If someone wants to stop, let them stop. If someone wants to opt out of certain questions. The following are some safety tips. Please stay with a buddy the entire morning. Do not be alone at any time. We talked about dressing comfortably in layers and keeping your possessions in the car or back in your office. Trust your instincts and leave yourself an out. And with that, remain a safe and respectful distance from people. Tents and cardboard boxes are people's homes, so please be respectful of that. If you need to call 911 at any point, please do so, and then let your team lead know. You may encounter some dogs on the morning of the count. Be aware of them. So now body language when doing the survey. Don't crowd anybody. Aim for a 45-degree angle so that you are facing the person, but you're not standing them dead on. When possible, allow the person to view the survey and responses being recorded as you go through. So this is discouraged body language. So this is facing someone straight on, and the interviewer is standing tall. Next, someone who is using very good body language to interview. He is down. If you have any issues with safety, please, if you need to call 911, do so immediately. And then call headquarters. And here's headquarters office. If you are at a fixed site, so who do we survey? We are going to survey people carrying their belongings in shopping carts or on bicycles, carrying a sleeping bag or a significant number of bags, laying or sitting on the sidewalk, people who look disheveled or unkempt, wearing multiple layers of clothing or hats, sitting at bus stops but not getting on the bus, people who are around day labor sites who are panhandling, people who we see walking out of washes, people who might be in vehicles with shades drawn or clothes draped around the windows that look to be packed full of belongings. If in doubt, introduce yourself and tell them what you're doing, and then ask them where they stayed last night. Each team lead will have a map to the sector, and please remember to mark where you surveyed people on the map. Mark the maps with an X for non-veteran people who are homeless, a V for veterans who are homeless, and a Y for youth who are homeless. Return all of the maps to headquarters with these markings when you return the completed legible surveys. Now we'll move on to the survey itself. Introduce yourself and explain what you are doing. Explain that the survey is confidential, and remind people that they may decline all or portions of the survey. A $5 gift card and a tote bag will be given to each participant. If interested, there's a VA and youth contact to offer after the survey is completed.
So then we're going to continue asking similar questions. Have you ever received a serious mental illness or SMI diagnosis? Have you ever received special education or special ed services for more than 6 months? A lot of times people here will say, oh yeah, when I was a kid, which is great, and then just follow up by saying, okay, thank you for sharing that. Was when you received those services as a kid, was it for 6 months or more? So if someone has said yes to one or more of the questions from 15 to 17, then you're going to continue on to ask questions 18 and 19. Because these are just follow-up questions to questions 15, 16, and 17. If the person said no or none to questions 15, 16, and 17, then you're going to go ahead and skip to question 20. So assuming that someone said yes, they had been experiencing some of these disabling conditions, you're going to ask a few follow-up questions. So has your disability been long-lasting, or do you expect it to be? And here it's a good idea to interject some of the disabilities that people may have noted already. So for example, if someone earlier said that they were experiencing problems with substance use and let's say chronic depression, it might be a good idea to read the question this way. Has your disability been long-lasting, or do you expect it to be? In other words, has your substance abuse or your chronic depression been long-lasting, or do you expect it to be? And then allow them to say yes, no, don't know. Next, you'll ask, has your disability made holding a job or staying in housing more difficult? And here again, you'll want to share anything that they've shared with you. So have you ever, can follow this question up again by saying, so has your substance use ever gotten in the way of you staying in housing or made it challenging for you to hold a job? Has your depression ever made it challenging? Next, you'll ask, do you regularly utilize services in the community aimed at supporting people experiencing homelessness? And here we're looking at housing services, not so much food banks or things like that. So it's important to read those examples there. Things like shelters, transitional housing, and other housing. And if someone answers yes, then you're going to skip to question 24. If someone says no, don't know, or they refuse to answer, you'll read question 23, which is what keeps you from accessing services for people experiencing homelessness. So what keeps you from accessing shelter, transitional housing, or other housing? And here the person's able to select all the different responses that apply to them. It's a good idea to allow the person to look on the survey with you at this point in time, kind of look on with you, and then read through each of these options. So has alcohol use problems ever kept you from being able to use services, housing services, substance use problems, PTSD, mental health problems, history of abuse, AIDS or an HIV-related illness, physical disability, other ongoing health issues? Maybe you didn't know how to access a certain type of service, and that's kept you from accessing housing. Maybe your family status, like you didn't have any children when the housing service you wanted required children, or maybe you had too many children and the housing service didn't have enough space to accommodate you and your children. Maybe you wanted to stay with a partner and the housing services were only for a single person. What about sexual or gender identity discrimination? Unsafe conditions such as theft, violence, or abuse, overcrowding in shelters, inadequate services, legal status, for example, needing to be a U.S. So this is the family member interview tool. And this is the tool you're going to use if someone has said that there were other folks sleeping with them that were family members that aren't going to complete a survey. So you wouldn't use this tool if there was a family present. So if you had a family that was in your presence, right? Like you had come across a family when you're doing your surveying, you would go ahead and just do individual survey tools with those people. So if there was let's say for example, there was a mom and her 2 children, and then her sister was there as well, and that was a family that you encountered. You would do an individual interview tool like the one we just reviewed with the mother, with her sister, and then if the children were of an appropriate age and the mom felt comfortable with you completing a survey with the children, you could complete a survey with the children. If the children are too young to answer questions like these, then you would use the family member interview tool, right? Because they're not going to be completing an interview tool. Or you would use the family member interview tool if you just had a mother present and she said that she had 2 children and a partner back at a camp that weren't going to be completing a survey today. You would pull out this family member interview tool and complete one for each of the family members that weren't present. So if there were 3 people back at a camp or a site, you would then complete 3 additional family member tools for each person that wasn't present with the one mother that you've just completed an individual member tool with. And you'll notice on this tool, as well as on the individual tool, that there's a space for a family ID number. If you are interviewing folks that are a part of a family, you're going to assign that family an ID number. And it could be whatever you decide to do with your team. So you would talk to your team lead about this beforehand. But you would, if this is the first family you encounter, you could just assign them the family number ID of 1. And then you would write that family ID number of 1 on each of the survey tools that you complete for that family. So if you complete 2 individual parent tools and then 2 more family member tools for children that are back at a campsite, all 4 of those interview tools would receive family ID number 1 written on them. And then where it says form blank of blank, if there were 4 surveys that you completed for one family, it would be survey 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, and 4 of 4. And then when you're done with those surveys, you can just clip them together or fold them together so that we know that all of those survey tools go together as a family. Though it's pretty likely that you'll encounter a family. That would be how you would count a family. So assuming that there's a family member not present with the person that you just interviewed using the individual tool, you would then go through this survey with that same individual that you just used the individual tool with and ask them questions about their family members not currently present. You'd fill out the survey in the exact same fashion, noting the location, who you are as an interviewer, the date, and the time that you're completing the survey. You would ask that individual for their family member's first and last name, the family member's date of birth, and then you would begin going through and asking these questions, which are very similar to the questions you just asked. You would ask them, how old is this person in your house, or how is this person in your household related to you? Is this your child, your spouse, another type of family, a non-married partner, or something else, non-family? You'd ask, where did that family member sleep last night? And then follow the same skip patterns. You'd ask, how old is this person? And if they hesitate, give them the options. You'd ask for the last 4 digits of their social security number if they know it, for this person's gender, for this person's race and ethnicity. You'd ask, have they ever served in the armed forces? Were they ever called into active duty as a member of the National Guard or reservist? Have they ever received health care or benefits from the VA? And so on and so forth. The questions will mirror the questions that you just asked of the individual, but that the individual will now be responsible. And then once you've completed a family member interview tool for each of the family members noted, you would thank the person for their time. Unfortunately, we can only give $5 gift cards to people who are present. So if you have the same example that we just used a second ago, a mother, her 2 children, and her sister are all present, only the mother and sister complete the surveys, you can give the mother 3 gift cards for herself, her 2 children. So next we have the observation tool. And the observation tool we use when someone says when you encounter someone who you think might be homeless, but says they don't want to participate in the survey. You can tell them thank you, they don't need to, they appreciate their time. And then once you're done with that encounter, you pull out an observation tool and just note what the questions are here. So you would indicate why you're using the form. Either someone said that they didn't want to participate, or there's a few other reasons why. Maybe you can see a campsite or some other type of site where folks are residing, and perhaps it's unsafe for you to enter. Perhaps you're unable to enter for some other reason. There's an animal, a dog, some other type of barrier that you don't want to pass. But you're able to observe that there's a few people there and you want to write down that you see 2 or 3 people at the site. Or there could be language problems, right? This person might speak a different language than you do and you're unable to complete the survey because of that. Or maybe you're driving down the road and you're unable to stop, but you see someone on the side of the road who is clearly experiencing homelessness. You could use an observation tool at that point as well. And then you would just go through the survey. Again, indicating why you're using the form. Perhaps someone's sleeping and you don't want to disturb them. And then you would say the total persons staying together as a household. So as far as you can see, perhaps you see a camp and you can see 3 tents. You don't know how many people are in those tents. So you could just say you're assuming it's 3 adults, or you could say not sure, but just give your best estimate. That's fine. Then you're going to say the location that you've observed each of these people, and all we need is just a general location, the corner of Ina and Thornydale or whatever street intersection you happen to be at. If you're out in the desert area or a rural area, you could say the wash near the freeway or the retail. Similarly, you'll make an estimate of the person's race, and you can select all that you think that apply here. As well as ethnicity. And then you can also share any other information that's identifying. So you can include things like types of clothing. So this person was wearing a baseball cap with the Red Sox logo and a green military jacket. Or any other kind of physical characteristics or conditions like. So when completing surveys, it's really important to ensure that all forms are legible. We're going to be sharing these surveys with data entry volunteers who will have to be able to read your surveys. And let's face it, some of us have some really bad handwriting, and that's okay. When you complete a survey, it's a good idea to just give yourself a minute to clean through the survey, no matter what type it is, and make sure that you've any notes that you made are legible. And it's okay to make notes throughout if you aren't sure how to answer a question at any point in time. You can say that you weren't sure and tell us why you chose what you did and give us a little situation in a note. But just make sure that those notes are legible and easy to read. Also make sure that you filled out the form correctly. If you missed a skip pattern or did a skip pattern incorrectly, it's fine to cross things out and make notes and make sure it's as correct as possible. For taking the time to do all of this work and asking others to share such personal information, it's really important that we're able to use this data. And we'll only be able to use this data if we can read it and if the surveys were completed correctly. Again, enter a specific location, but it doesn't have to be too specific. You don't need to use GPS location or anything like that. But sharing like street corners or, like I said, the name of the wash or river that you're walking in, that information will help us when we do future outreach and decide where we should be focusing our energy and time. It will also help us to ensure that if we have 2 surveys that are identical and we think they might be a duplicate survey, if we can see that the locations were different enough and someone didn't have enough time to move from one location to another and complete another survey, that it's not a duplicated survey. So thanks for sharing location information as well as date and time. We'll use that information to make sure that it's not a duplicated survey. Use 1 form per individual. We have plenty of forms and we can always bring you more forms. Please don't try to save paper. We definitely care about paper, but this is a time where it's really important that we have a individual form for each survey that you complete with each person. It will allow us to have accurate, clear information. And then also use one survey for each family member. So if a person reports that there's 3 family members in another location that aren't going to complete a survey, you'll then use 3 separate family member surveys. And then when you're done, clip the individual and associated family member forms together in some way that you can, and number them with the family ID number. So it's really important that you practice the survey before you go out into the community. Sometimes you look at a survey and it seems really easy to do, but then you get in it and you're confused about some of the questions or what they really mean, or people sometimes have questions for you that you weren't anticipating. And so you can kind of get ahead of these questions by practicing. So we ask you to find a friend, a family member, or a coworker to practice administering the survey with until you feel comfortable with the questions. And it's a good idea to have a friend, family member, or coworker pretend to be homeless or experiencing problems with homelessness or problems with disabilities. This way that you're able to understand what kinds of questions people might ask or how to use the skip patterns in the survey. And then clarify any questions you have about the surveys with your team leader before the day of the count. Your team leader will have information about how to do the survey. And then one last time, your team leaders are responsible for the legibility of the team surveys. So your team leader will be looking over your surveys, but please do your team leader a favor and clean each of your surveys as you complete them. Sometimes if you wait until the very end, you'll forget, and you may also forget what you meant in certain notes, or if you see an error that you made, you may not remember how to correct that error after waiting a stretch of time. So it's best to clean and read through your surveys directly after completing them with folks in the community. Please correct any illegibility, make sure that it's clear, that someone else can read your handwriting so that we can make sure that that data is viable and useful and accurate. Legibility is key, and we appreciate you taking the time to give us clean surveys. Finally, we're going to talk about confidentiality. Each of you, if you haven't already, needs to complete a confidentiality form and a liability waiver. You should have received this form at the day of the community training. If you weren't able to attend the community training on Monday, the January 23rd, then you likely have received this waiver in an email. If you haven't received it in an email, your team leader will have these forms available for you the morning of the count. But it's essential that all volunteers complete this confidentiality form and liability waiver before beginning any surveys. And when you sign this form and read through it, you'll see this information on this form, which says that you must treat the information that we gather with folks in the community during the street count as confidential and not share the information that you learn with anyone. TPCH defines sensitive information as names, nicknames, identifying information, addresses, locations, whereabouts. So it's important that you know the team plan before you begin on the day of the count, January 25th. You'll need to connect with your team leader prior to this time. And your team leader has your contact information and should be reaching out to you either by phone or email. So please be on the lookout for a phone call or an email from your team leader so that you can discuss the following things. You want to make sure that you know who each other are, you know who your team leader is, and your team leader knows that you're a volunteer on their team. You'll want to make sure that you know where you and your team are going to meet the morning of the count and what time you'll be meeting. Typically, we ask teams to meet before sunrise at a location in their sector. Meet there and then break apart and decide how you're going to complete surveys in your section. Typically, folks begin doing surveys as the sun's coming up before people in the community begin making their way from the places that they're sleeping to services in the city. So it's important to know where that location is and what time. Also important to know what section you're working in and the layout of your section, where you should concentrate your time and energy looking for people. Should you be looking in parks, churches, libraries, convenience stores? Having some information before you begin on the day of the count will be important. So talk with your team lead about how you can help begin surveying your area and knowing the layout and plan for that day. Exchange contact information. I think it's a really great idea to have your team lead's cell phone number in your cell phone so that you can call them if there's any kind of emergency. Also, it might be a good idea to have other folks' contact information on your team in case you need support. Create a survey to plan your area, as I mentioned, and talk about. So that's all the information that we have for you today. I know that was a lot of information, but we really appreciate you taking the time to complete this training. You'll see here that there's a link to complete a quick survey about the information that you just learned. It'll be a few questions to get you thinking about what you learned and hopefully to help you to formulate questions that you might have to share with your team lead. So thank you for clicking the link. Once you've completed this survey, once you click the link and complete